Today we're talking to Beverly Klau, who is an educator and connector with a passion for building communities and strengthening connection between people. Beverly talks about her experience caring for her daughter who was diagnosed with a rare disease and how that's impacted the growth of her company, Verbina.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Katie, for having me. So I'm Bev Klau, and I'm an educator by trade, and I am also a community builder and now an entrepreneur. So I spent over a decade in classrooms, in elementary school classrooms as a teacher. And then as my kids became the age, the students for whom I was teaching, I wanted to be in a different place. So I became more active as really on the grassroots level in our town as a community builder, working in a way to welcome immigrants into our school system and working in partnership with an anti-racism group in our town, as well as with our local library to create in-person ways to connect with neighbors. So we created this program called Piecemeal. So to get people together and break bread and really meet each other. And what I was at a crossroads, I think, like so many other people who are in this sandwich generation or midlife, where I was like, all right, I no longer want to be teaching in the classroom. I'm looking for the next thing that I want to do. I really tried different things. And then I wanted to really focus on what I love doing the most, which is holding space and bringing people together so that they can connect on a deeper level. And so I wanted to bring that facilitation that I love to do on a larger scale. So that's really where Verbina comes from, is this desire to create space for people to connect or build community. And while I was building the app, my daughter got sick. So I was in process of creating this platform and then had to take a complete break and become a full-time caregiver while my daughter was diagnosed with this rare health condition, was with her really full-time for about 4 or 5 months or so. And then on reflecting on the experience of how isolating and lonely it is to be on a health journey, both as a patient and in my case as a caregiver, I wanted to see about bringing Verbina to focus on people on health journeys. So that's really where Verbina comes from.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And obviously you have a heart for building communities and growing connections with people. Do you know where that came from? Like, has this always been a passion of yours, or did it grow out of somewhere?
You know, what I always wanted to be when I was younger, I always wanted to be a teacher. And so like I was that person who set up my bedroom with my stuffed animals on the floor, like in a circle. And I wanted to, what I love most about teaching, both when I was, pretending to be a teacher and when I became a teacher, was always like that circle time, like bringing people together. I think it's a very natural desire to connect. And that has always been my passion is really just connecting with people. So, and you can do that one-on-one and in a group setting. So but where it comes from, I think it's innate.
Yeah, no, I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about the app itself? Like what does it do? What's the goal? How do people use it?
Absolutely. So really the mission is to build resilience by connecting to the collective power of your own community. So what we're trying to do is have people feel better by connecting with each other. And the way that it works is it's all video based, and you have one person who's the host. They create an invitation and invite people into a specific conversation. And after they create this video invitation, and we always say, like, the more intention you put behind this invitation, the better results or the better conversation you'll have. So then this private conversation then is the host rather invites people into this private conversation, and then people join and contribute their own video messages. And so what I like to imagine is almost like a large dining room table, which is where some of the best conversations, at least in our family, happen. And so you can imagine that, like, what happens in a Verbina video collection is this conversation is happening asynchronously, across time and space. But really what makes Verbena unique from some of these other video collecting platforms is that we're not creating a product. This is not a video montage. Those are awesome, but this is different. This is a conversation. So people are responding to what's been said before. So that's, and you can benefit by when you're contributing. Not only are you responding to that invitation video that the host has put out there, but also by the other contributions that others have shared. And then all of these videos are then sent to a recipient, and then the recipient has an opportunity, if they want, to respond. But there's no expectation that the recipient needs to respond.
And can people in the app respond? There's a host that puts out, a prompt or a question or a talking point.
Mhm.
People respond to that. Can people then respond to those responses?
Sure. I mean, the way that it's set up, like if I was the host and I invited a whole bunch of people in and Katie, you responded to the general invitation, then someone else could refer to what you said. You could say, I'm going to agree with Katie. Like that summer that we had on the beach was transformational in who I became as an adult, so people could refer to other things.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to like replicate the, a dining table experience or circle time, like you said. Um,
Exactly.
can you talk, obviously you've done your research in building the app, and as an educator, can you talk a little bit about the research behind, that shows that social connections lead to improved health outcomes, sort of as we talk about, the caregiving community and what it's like to exist here, sort of in health land?
Absolutely. It's some of this, like, I just instinctively thought, like, oh, yeah, social connections are important. Like, they make us feel good. We all know this inherently. But then when I started to do some research and dig around, there's actually a large growing body of research. So, academic institutions have been doing this for a long time, as well as there's a Foundation for Social Connection, which is in DC. I get their weekly emails. So there's a whole bunch of people really studying this in a rigorous way. And that we now know that social connection is vital to physical, emotional, and mental health. And we've learned that a lack of social connection is actually a greater detriment to health than obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure, which is amazing. You think about there's so much education about, all of those health areas, but then, this is now a new thing that I think post-COVID more people are talking about. But some of the other things I can share with you, that the risk of death among men and women with the fewest social ties is more than twice as high as the risk for adults with the most social ties. So social connection, it's not just nice, it's actually necessary. And our current Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, he has written a whole book. It's called Together, The Healing Power of Social Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World, all about this. And it's a wonderful book. He was the Surgeon General under Obama, Trump, and now Biden. So he's like, his main emphasis is on the loneliness epidemic. So this is really an important topic at our present moment. And if you think about all of this research about loneliness, when we look at family caregivers, they report being 40 to 70% of having depression caused by feelings of loneliness and isolation. So it's really specifically a concern for people on this health journey. And I focus on caregivers in particular.
Yeah, those are some big important stats, and I'm interested to read that book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Something that I've noticed in my own experience and talking to caregivers, day in and day out is like people are finding community and connection on social media as it exists now. And there's nothing to say that one version is better than the other. It's like where you can find your people. But I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about just what you've experienced on social media and some of the trends that you're seeing that make something like Verbena different, or impactful in a different way.
Sure. I mean, social media is it's the sea that so many people are just kind of living in. But I have taken I wanted to learn more about it. And so I think where I really started was with the Center for Humane Technology. And you might be familiar with the movie The Social Dilemma. It was on Netflix. And it's really the folks who kind of built the technology that we all know today. They Most of those key people have left, and they've now created this new movement called the Center for Humane Technology. And their premise is they want to use technology for helping and not harming humans. And so I've been following. They have a podcast, and they also have a course that's an 8-module course. It's open to everyone. It's free, and they also have a really lovely community that I encourage people to check out. And at the very least, watch the movie, the documentary. And if you have children, teenagers, people in your home who have phones, they should be watching this. You should be watching it together and talking about it, because it's so important to really look at social media critically. One of the things that we have found in sharing Verbena with people is their whole understanding of what social media is really is so different from what Verbena is trying to be. So people ask, well, like, is there a place for likes? It's like, no, this is not about amassing likes. This is not about getting followers. Like, you are only going to be communicating with people that you know. And this is fully private. We're actually HIPAA compliant. So this is not a space where you're going to be promoting your brand or any of that. So we're really very different. And I think we also, you pay to use Verbena. So the host has to pay to have a video collection, to host one. And this is so different from what everyone is used to, because on social media, you think of it as being free, but actually you are the product. So all those advertisers, they are, they look at you as the product. So I always explain to people, which I learned from The Social Dilemma, it's like, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. That being said, I do go on to Facebook with a real consciousness around it. I have certain groups, like within my town, like I want to follow certain things that this is really the way to get information in a quick way. But the people who I communicate with on Facebook, those are people who I know in real life. And I think that is important. That being said, I also, I do spend some time on LinkedIn, and that is how I've gotten to meet a lot of people professionally. So I think that social media, it's a real mixed bag. And I think that it's important to understand that it's making it very hard to focus. It really is eroding at our abilities to have longer attention spans. In some cases, it is really making our world a much more divisive place and even eroding democracy. So, Verbena's goal is really to be the opposite of that. We want to bring people together rather than divide them. So it's a very different consciousness and that we're built on. And I think that the consciousness of a platform is really important. If in creating Verbena, the goal has always been to create a space to bring people together. Whereas Facebook, it was created to really rank people on their appearances. So it's like, if you think about what it's based on, it's not a surprise that it is having such an effect on the external things that are really not at the heart of what matters.
Yeah, I think you've just said something really interesting about this distinction between like validation and connection. And I think some people, like you've just said, can use social media really intentionally and find connection in a meaningful way. But largely, it's likes and shares and follows and, these like vanity metrics that somehow then feed into our worth if we're not careful.
Yeah.
You've talked a little bit about how Verbena feels different and how you want it to feel different and how it's, behaviorally a little bit different than what people are used to. I'm just sort of curious about, like, have you heard from people about, a hump in like this behavior change or it being different? This is sort of vague, but just like, because it's so different from what someone's used to, what are the sticking points there? Or is it just like positive feedback? People are like, finally, this is what we need.
No, it's so different that people, users have been a little bit confused because we're so used to going somewhere and being passive. And whereas when you go onto, if you download Verbena and you go onto the app, there's you can check out. We have one sample video collection, so you can see what does this look like. There's a welcome video from me, but other than that, you're not going to be scrolling. You can't search people. All you can do is become a host and create a conversation, or if you're invited by a host, you can then contribute. But there is no passive activity. There's no advertising. In fact, when talking to people about Verbena, so many folks are very confused because they're like, well, what's your engagement? What's the sticking point? How long are people going to spend on there? And it's like, well, this is the opposite. I think if you kind of compare it to like a meditation app, like you go in there for a specific purpose, and then you kind of connect with people, and then you're done, and then you should hopefully feel better, and then you go about your life, and you can dip back into these conversations as often as you want. But the idea is not to just like lose your day. For myself, like whenever I do go on to social media, I make a point to either set a timer or look at the clock so I know how long I've been on there. I mean, we've all fallen into like a doom scrolling, a very long time on the couch. And that is that is not what Verbena is designed to do. We're not trying to like drive engagement, and it's not the model that we're using. So it is very different. And I think that it's taking folks a while to kind of come around to how it works. And also, like, it takes effort. It doesn't take any effort to scroll on Instagram, but this takes effort. You either are hosting a conversation or you're responding, and it requires being real and connecting with something important, and then providing messages of support, which take effort, and it's very different.
I think what you're touching on, though, is why people feel so lonely on social media. And I'm boiling this down probably so simply, but, you think you're connected. And I work in social media. I spend a lot of time on social media, but you think you're connected, but you're not really building connection because it's so easy. And I think to be vulnerable and build real connection or real community with people, you have to put some legwork in. But we're not used to that.
Right. No, it does. It takes effort. And we're trying to make Verbena as similar to like a real life conversation as possible. That's why it's all video based. So it is like, I think, the next best thing to being in person. Sometimes we say like Verbena brings you to the bedside, because you can't, in some cases, bring everyone to the bedside. And in many cases, like, the patient wouldn't want everyone by their bedside,
Yeah, I'm thinking about your dinner table analogy, trying to replicate this feeling. And it's like, yeah, of course it's more work to bare your soul and share things with people. But the end of those conversations always feels so fulfilling and gratifying and rich to have those connections with people, that it's worth the legwork or the effort that it takes. So I'm excited about what people can do in Verbena. You mentioned that you have an example in there, someone can see what it looks like. I'm wondering if you can give us an example of how Verbena might work for, a caregiver, a care recipient, this, care partnership or care team.
Oh, that's great. So, I'll give you a real life example that we use I mentioned that my daughter has a rare condition, and that was really what, kind of brought me along this path. And so part of her routine maintenance is she gets routine MRIs. And so this was not her first MRI. It was not like an emergency, but it was just a routine MRI. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to surprise her with a Verbena. And so I reached out to just a small group of just family and friends, and invited them in and said, in my invitation message, this is not Sadie's first MRI, but it would be awesome. No one likes to get an MRI. Like, if you haven't had one, it's awful. Like, it's just not fun, right? It's loud, it's uncomfortable. And so I said, just give her a little boost and tell her you'll be thinking about her and that you love her. And so then on the drive from our house to the hospital, at a time that is, fraught with anxiety, you're like, what do I do? And he said, hey, Sadie, guess what? I made you a verbena. She's like, really? And so, I sent it to her. She opens it up on her phone. She's now 11 at the time. And she gets to go through and see these really beautiful messages from people who love her. And she gets to kind of, be just buoyed in energy and love going into this appointment. And she can watch the videos over and over. And then she can see, someone like, oh, they've got their dog with them. Like, I love the dog. And, she's like, can like watch the videos over and over, see the things that she didn't notice the first time. And then in the waiting room, again, a time when you're going to be anxious, and she can revisit them. So, and then as her mother, as her caregiver, it makes me feel like all you want to do when you're the caregiver is make your loved one comfortable, make them happy. Like, what can you do? There's so much anxiety in terms of like, I don't know how to help them. And this is one thing that you can do. You can make going into a procedure just a time when they're really showered in love and support. And so that's just an example that I love to share, because it was a moment of like, yeah, this is actually fulfilling our goal here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got an MRI this morning and I forgot how
Oh,
loud they are inside.
oh my
I
God.
haven't had one in probably like 10 years and I forgot how loud those machines are. And yeah, like a message of encouragement, even though it's not my first one, would have been so nice.
Yeah. Yes.
um, I guess the follow-up question related to caregivers, or people that are in, caregiving situations. I think something we often see is, um, just like complicated family dynamics, people that live far away, or there's like a lack of trust and transparency related to finances, or siblings don't agree on what they should do for mom or dad, or, any number of reasons. I could list a million. Um, I'm wondering if you can just like hypothesize with me out loud about how Verbena might impact, these kind of complicated family relationships.
Sure. I think what Verbena offers, in the same way that like in real life, you might, if the whole family's together, you might pull aside a few people to have a certain conversation. The way a Verbena video collection works is that host only invites particular people into a conversation. This is not going to be broadcast in a large way. So you could really, as the host, you can control who hears what or who's invited to what conversation. And furthermore, if someone says something that is not productive, out of line, whatever it is, if it's like a taboo subject, then you can, as the host, you can delete that contribution. And then you could pick up the phone and call your brother and say, hey, we're not going to be talking about that in this video collection, where this is going to be messages for mom. So like, let's not talk about that. Or you and I need to have a conversation about this. This is not the place for it. So, I think that what I've used my understanding of real life facilitation, where you really set very clear parameters for this is what we're going to be talking about. These are the guidelines. You could, as the host, create a conversation along those same lines. So it's all about like putting the guardrails up for a conversation. I once heard like the stronger the container, the more fruitful the conversation. I might not be getting that exactly right, but it's along those lines of like, and you can, as a host, really create a very safe and strong container for whoever you're going to invite in. So it's possible. Verbena could be used for so many different uses, and it's really up to the host to like, how do they want to use it? Do they want to use it to have a conversation about finance, or a conversation about, really complicated family dynamics? Maybe, it might be for some families a more productive space than a real-time conversation.
This is a really silly thought that I've just had. I just watched bear with me, the Bachelorette, Bachelor season is on right now. There was a Women Tell
Okay.
All episode last night where all the, contestants that haven't made it come on stage and share about their experiences. And it was just chaotic. You couldn't understand what anyone was saying because they were all just talking over each other. And when you just said, giving it a strong container for a conversation to happen, that was like exactly what they needed last night, because I just picture a family doing the same thing where everyone's, shouting and talking and yelling over each other. And it's like, we're not going anywhere because no one can even hear each other. So I can see how Verbena can, that was, a bit of a ping pong there from my immediate thought to The Bachelor. But I can see how Verbena can be that kind of container.
Yeah.
One logistical question about Verbena, I'm just curious, do the capsules or conversations, do they stay later? Like, could you watch them after the fact?
Yeah, they live on there. They live in the cloud, and so they are there until the host deletes them. So they live there infinitely, and that's one of the reasons why we do have to charge, because you have to pay for storage. So that's they live there infinitely. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about different use cases, in this case, I can imagine one where, there's not often there's a primary caregiver and they're, telling dad or telling their siblings, keeping everyone in the loop. I can imagine a place where this could be useful for that, where you're trying to relay information to many people and build, trust and transparency about the care for mom or the care for your daughter. So, um,
Absolutely. And I think along those lines, when you are a caregiver, many times you're exhausted telling the same story or the update. And it's like, oh, I don't want to have to say it again. And so you could just say it once, and you could, invite everyone in, they can hear it, they could then, respond to it. It could definitely be a way to share with folks what's going on.
yeah, I love that. I mean, I love all the different use cases of Romina, from, practical to encouraging, and a way to build connections between your community.
Mhm.
You talked a little bit about, your experience feeling lonely and your caregiving experience. That's what Rubina's been born out of. Um, I'm throwing this question at you without having asked it in advance, but just what else was that experience like for you? Like, where did you find connection? Did you, I guess I'm thinking about caregivers who are like new to this caregiving experience and unsure like where to turn, where to find their people. Not sure if Verbena is the right fit for them. I don't, just where can people find connection? Where did you find
Well,
connection?
yeah. I mean, I found that when I was, dealing with being a caregiver in a really high stress moment with my daughter's diagnosis, I found I wanted I wanted to connect with people in two different ways. One way is I wanted to connect with people who were really in the same boat as me. Like I wanted to talk to other parents who had the exact same diagnosis for their child. And so, like so many people, you go on to you find like a private Facebook group for people whose kids have this rare disease. And and on the one hand, I found comfort, like comfort kind of in quotes of like being like, okay, I'm not alone. There's some other people here. I can ask questions of like, oh, have you tried this medication? What works? Do you find these symptoms? And it was helpful in some ways for like some of that tactical answers, but every case is unique. I also found that it was in some ways really not helpful because, I'd find people who were saying things that were like not based on science, like, and I think like social media, like I found it was a mixed bag. Like I would kind of walk away from, dipping in and asking questions and reading stuff. And it was like, oh, that was kind of mixed, like there was some people saying negative things. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I got answers maybe, but like, I probably would be better off talking to our doctors. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not alone. I'm not the only mom who's got a kid with this very rare, one in a million kids have this. Um, so then that was like one way that I would feel social connections. But what I actually found more powerful for me was connecting with my own community, like my own friends, my own family. And, even though I don't have any friends whose kids have this condition, I have a friend whose kid had leukemia. And, she could talk to me about, okay, at Children's Hospital, here's where the coffee shop is. Here's how you're going to deal with the 504, and I could talk to someone else about other things. Sometimes also you want to connect with people and not talk about your kid who's sick. You want to just talk about other things, or maybe you actually want to connect with yourself. Like, what do I like to do? Like, I like to take walks. I like to do yoga. I like to cook, so I think that really there's like the tactical needs of like, I want the answer. Is this the right medication? Is this a good place for my parents to go when they're aging in place? You want to kind of get like gather information. And then there's also like, I want to connect and really fill my cup, if you will. So I found strength in both of those areas, but ultimately, what Verbena is trying to do is, we're not trying to be like a Swiss Army knife for caregiving in terms of like there are lots of apps that really help with the logistical pieces of like medication, appointments, where to keep all of your information, and we're really all about the social connection piece. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. I think there's just a feeling at the beginning that's like, where are my people? So it's always interesting to talk to caregivers, but where they found their people and what was useful to them, in their.
Yeah. And what I did find also is that knowing like you're not alone, even though it can feel very lonely, um, if you're a caregiver, you're one of 53 million plus caregivers in this country, and it might feel, and people don't talk about it. Like that's the big thing about caregiving is people don't self-identify. So you might not realize that someone else is caring for their loved one because people aren't talking about it. But I do think more people are talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. I cared for my dad for a while who has substance use disorder and didn't identify as a caregiver because I think of caregivers as people that care for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's. That's sort of like the default in my brain. I guess as a follow-up to what you've just said, your daughter was diagnosed. That must have been very scary, especially with such a rare disease, trying to figure out what's going on. When and how did you become comfortable talking about that with other people, to then realize that, oh, I have a friend whose son had leukemia or,
Mhm.
any other connection you made? What was that experience like, sort of starting to open up about your caregiving journey?
Yeah, my daughter was diagnosed during COVID. And so it was it, I know I'm not alone in that the diagnosis was a long path. And I think that as a parent, you know your child and you know when something is wrong. And the doctors didn't see it. I knew that there was something inherently not right, and it's really upsetting how many times that these things are not like the physical isn't always looked at first. Sometimes it's like the psychological. It's like, oh, maybe she's sad, maybe she misses something, and because this was all really coming to a head when she was doing her remote school during COVID times. It was a very difficult time to recognize that there was actually something physically going on. So it was like, oh, maybe she's fatigued from looking at a computer screen. I knew that wasn't going on. So we also had her tested for COVID over and over and over. So like maybe it's COVID. Ultimately, I think that's really important as a parent and as a caregiver to advocate for your loved one. And if you think something is not right, to keep pushing, to be a squeaky wheel. I wouldn't rest until I knew we had really uncovered everything. And so it was when I took her to an optometrist that the optometrist said, you need to bring her to an ophthalmologist. And the pediatric ophthalmologist said she needs to have an MRI and a lumbar puncture. That's your next step. So uh, I think that it's really important to I was pretty vocal, with my friend group. I'm blessed to have really close friends, other parents who I would talk to and to get support from them, and they knew that we were trying to figure something out. I also recognized that I was really in a place of privilege that I speak English as a first language. I feel comfortable talking to doctors and questioning them. I grew up with my father working in a hospital, so I was very comfortable in a hospital setting. And so I did not have the issues that some people might have of really being assertive. And so I think it's not something that I take for granted, that that's a privilege, that I feel comfortable continuing to push for answers and to ask for more testing. So, after she was put on medication and things looked fine, when the headaches returned, I knew that she needed to have a follow-up MRI. And so I just kept pushing for it. And so I think that you have to be a squeaky wheel. You have to demand for what you want. And it's often not the natural instinct. And I think in many times women in particular can be questioned. So I think that's it's a long road. It can be very lonely, and it can feel like you're being um diminished in a way. I don't want to say gaslit, but I know that that does happen many times for folks. That didn't happen for me, but at the same time, I had to really persevere. So I think that that's very important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, that part of your daughter's story and your story also. Um, I do know too well the experience of being dismissed by the doctor. Maybe it's not full on gaslighting, but definitely not feeling heard by
Hmm.
professionals, and totally echo what you just said about advocating for yourself, and the person you're caring for. We like to ask everyone to wrap up this conversation, and you just talked a little bit about what you might advise to other caregivers, but what is your top tip for other caregivers out there?
I think it's really important to take care of yourself as a caregiver. If you are not taking care of yourself, you really cannot take care of your loved one. And it's something that you have to actively do. And one of the most important things, as we talked about, that social connection really is medicine. It's absolutely vital to your health and well-being, and you need to seek it out. You have to make that a priority. And whether that's in person, on the phone, on Verbena, you need to have those personal connections. I know for myself, I build it into my life. I make sure that I go to my book club and make sure that I schedule times for walks with friends, lunch with friends. If you don't do that, your health and well-being will suffer, and you have to build it into who you are. And that's my number one tip. And I know that for myself, when I'm starting to feel sad, that means that I'm not getting the social connection that I need. It's like a vitamin, so you have to take it.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I love what you have built and are building at Verbena to be a vitamin for people, like to help fill this and help people be connected to their communities. Um, I guess before we go, is there anything else that you want to share about Verbena that we've missed? And then where can people find you and find Verbena if they would like to participate?
Absolutely. So we are on both platforms. Verbena is Verbina. So similar to the plant, but Bina with an I. So it's words, verb. Bina means wisdom. So words and wisdom. And, but like the plant. So it's something natural and beautiful. And actually, the Verbena plant was used for many years for boosting your serotonin. So that's also what we're trying to do at Verbena, is to make you feel better. So you can find us on both platforms. We are building out our web-based version. We have learned that so many folks want to use Verbena, but sitting in front of their computer, it's a more thoughtful approach where they can really sit down, take their time, as opposed to holding their phones while contributing messages of love and support. So we're building out our web base. So you can find us at verbena.app. So verbena.app. And you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Beverly Klau, Klau. And we're really trying to make Verbena a place that helps and supports people. And we're trying to grow in terms of our connecting with other businesses and institutions that serve patients and caregivers. So if anyone is interested in using Verbena to support the people in their community, just you can reach out to me. Would love to partner with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I I can see the V behind you reaching over. It's got like growth plant vibes based on what you just said.
Exactly.
Um, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing about the app and about your story and the journey you've been on with your daughter. I think this is all really valuable to our audience. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Katie. I really enjoyed it.